Welcome to another episode of Saints in the Parish podcast. Happy to have you with us. We're talking with some of the lay ministers that work for the church. You know, the church has, for the last 50 to 70 years, been working very hard to get more people involved in the actual work of the church. Now, we have hundreds and hundreds of incredible volunteers, but there is a couple of, I would say, jobs that probably were volunteers. I know they certainly were here at our church. Like the youth minister was a volunteer here 25 years ago. And I can remember, I think Mylon Sherman was the first paid youth minister here at St. Lawrence. That was a big change. I know our music people were all volunteers, and our director of religious education was a volunteer. And all of a sudden, it became not overwhelming, but it became a point. And I have with me Stephen Sylvester, our youth minister, a great example. It came after child protection. Well, like, what do you do if they don't, check in all of their adults and make sure they're properly certified? What do you do if they don't put something on the calendar? What do you do? I mean, what do you do when it comes to spending money? You can't just give, a volunteer your credit card or give them cash, so it came a point where the minister was needed to really organize all of the various events and make sure all the rooms are booked, make sure that you go out and purchase. You probably go to Sam's every week, purchasing everything that you need for both junior high youth ministry and high school youth ministry. And being responsible with all of those realities. And so we, of course, blessed to have a full-time high school and junior high youth minister, Stephen Sylvester. So my question basically to all of our lay ministers is, how do you see God working in your ministry?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, the clearest way that I see that is in watching the students as they progress through the ministry and seeing the changes that happen in their lives and the things that they tell me. Because, teenagers, a lot of times it's hard to see if what you're telling them is having the desired effect. And so one of the things that I love to point this out to people is to say, I can tell you exactly who came through the program that I had some kind of an influence on, which again, I'm not taking full credit for it, but if they came to the youth programs, exactly. Yeah. And so in my, the ways that I could, maybe do better, I can still look at the teens and say, the Lord and the Holy Spirit is working through the things that I'm doing for them. And the environment that the youth ministry creates for them is just a beautiful thing that lasts far beyond when they stop coming to youth ministry events.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And of course, I was very blessed this summer to be able to go on one of the junior high events with our junior high students and to go on one of the high school events with our high school. Normally don't really have the opportunity to travel that way because my duties and responsibilities in the parish, but it's very blessed to have an extra priest here this summer to be able to do that. And so I want to give two examples and then if you think of an example or two that maybe helped you, at the junior high event, I can remember there was a young student and they had been struggling with something in their life. Now, a seventh grader, I don't even know how old a seventh grader is, 12 or something around that. But, I'm like, you're struggling? Yeah, I'm really struggling with this. And I'm really happy to be able to talk to someone about this. And, he said, well, it's really not something I want to talk to my mom or dad about, although that is a great indicator and a lead in to get moms and dads to kind of figure. We offer a couple of programs, like we offer Boys Night Out program where the dads have to come with their sons and a mother-daughter tea, where the mothers and daughters have to come to a tea, and ultimately we talk to them to at least introduce an opportunity for you to talk to your children on some really sensitive matters. But I could see the weight. Now, this is a seventh grader, really, but I could see just the weight lifted off of him because he had been struggling with something and he really wanted to know how that played a part in his spiritual life or how God felt about it, or, that's what he really wanted to know. And I was like, okay, I'm really glad to help this person. And so that was the junior high, but I also had the opportunity to go to Cove Crest, which is our high school camp that I went to. And I was sitting out every morning to hear confessions from 7 o'clock to 8:30 every morning for an hour and a half. And so, I didn't have too many of our students come through my confessional line because it was 10 priests hearing confession. So most of our students went to another priest, which is absolutely fine. But I was talking to a lot of other students. There was probably 290 other high school students at this particular event that we were at. And I was thinking to myself, isn't it nice that they have a youth group to go back to? Because if we talked about conversion in their life, which that's what we talked about, it's nice then if you have an atmosphere, a group of friends, that are moving where you're moving. They're not going to be tempting you to do things that are going to pull you away from your conversion. They're actually going to be pulling you toward your conversion. Whereas I'll never see any of these people probably ever again in my life. But they had a conversion, reconciliation helped that conversion, and now they get to go home and be in a youth group. And I mean, I think you had the opportunity to see that even in our young people.
Absolutely. I have the opportunity to see it every week because it's such a beautiful way of fulfilling a practical need for teenagers. So there's the catechetical aspect of what we do where we're teaching them about their Catholic faith, but it is so valuable for teens to be able to get together in a group where they know that they can be themselves, that these people will support them in their journey of faith, and so that student that came and talked to you, that's something that, how many seventh graders have the opportunity to tell someone who's not their mom or dad, this is a thing that I'm struggling with, and I just need somebody to listen to me?
I would say most of them probably just talk to their friends. Well, what other 12-year-old is going to give them good advice? Matter of fact, they're going to mostly joke about some of this stuff.
True, but they're expressing these very deep, heavy things that you're talking about.
And in some of the youth ministry, I guess to people looking from the outside in, they might see it as just us having fun. Like we go bowling with the young people, and they may say, well, how is that youth ministry? You know what I mean? Yet we know that once again, they have the opportunity to interact with some of these friends doing something that is fun, that are also on the same journey they're on.
Exactly. And they can feel the support. It's very clear whenever we get, especially the middle school students together, because the high schoolers are honestly better at keeping all of that stuff inside. They've gotten too cool for that type of thing. But the middle schoolers specifically, they wear everything on their sleeve that they're feeling. And I can tell immediately when somebody feels like they belong to the community of people that's here, that's all trying to get to a certain place in their Catholic faith to learn more about it. And they feel like their friends are not going to make fun of them for that.
Now, what about parishes that really don't have a lot of youth ministry? I know you have a couple of young people that come over and join in our parish because their parents want this, and their parish doesn't have enough students really for a good youth ministry program. And so that's perfectly fine too, huh?
It is, absolutely. I actually encourage the students to, what we call it, double dipping. So if something works better for their schedule, if they want to go to Christ the King or St. Patrick's or do something down in Gulf Shores, if that works better for you, I say go for it. Right. Get involved in some way, shape, or form in youth ministry because it is so valuable for students this age.
And even going to church. You know what I mean? Like that really helps them understand more about the liturgy, more about Mass, and getting more out of, especially as they're growing, because you literally can see from junior high to high school an enormous change. I can even, we know a lot of the students, and I can even mention a few that, when they first started being an altar server, they were just like out in space, and now they're so serious about it. They take their job really serious because they matured. It's beautiful. And it's all right. I tell people all the time, it's all right to be in maturity as long as you're on a path of maturity.
Yes, growth. It's all about growth. And that is why we do youth ministry, is so that we give people a better chance to grow in their faith in that way.
Yeah. So you see this playing a really important role in your spiritual life too, you know what I mean?
It's a daily, or I guess I should say weekly reminder, because every time we meet with the students, I always am struck by they're so honest. Like they ask such honest questions, and I can see a lot of the struggles that I went through as a teenager in them still, and being able to tell them, hey, maybe this will be helpful for you, or encouraging them to continue pursuing whatever they're pursuing in their faith. It's a good reminder for me because I have to be in a place where I can offer those things to the students before, before I'm able to really do that for them. So it is a constant reminder for me that I need to maintain my own spiritual life, and so that I have something to give back to the students that come to youth ministry.
Well, we really appreciate all that you do in the youth ministry and helping these young people. And again, I'm sure that a lot of good has come out of what you're doing that you'll never see.
Of course.
But just know that the Lord is very happy anytime that we're working on His behalf to help bring these students closer to Him through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit with intercessor of His mother, Mary. So we appreciate all that you do. Welcome back to our discussion on lay ministry in the church. As I mentioned, there's just a need for so many lay ministers' actual work for the church, depending on how large your parish is. So our parish had reached a point where we really needed a kind of a media coordinator. And I remember, I may have been the first one in the archdiocese because we have to turn in a description of what the employee is going to be doing to the archdiocese before we hire the person. And they kind of said, what is a media person? They didn't have any idea what this person could do in their work for the church. And I remember responding, what century do you live in? Because at the time, and this was about 10, 12, 14 years ago, at the time, social media wasn't really big, but you could see it getting big. At this time, and I would say about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, social media was really for the college students. And then it moved down to the high school students. And it wasn't long before then their parents and grandparents got on social media. And then all the kids found a way to get off of that social media and get onto some other social media. So keeping up with the young people was a challenge. Okay, so that's one thing. How that we could use social media to bring about the greater glory of God, use it for spiritual purposes, not just for secular purposes, was a great challenge. I look at about, I would say 15 to 20 Catholic websites, a week, because I'm always looking up, trying to order baptismal certificates or whatever. So I go look it up, you know what I mean? And I'll never, every time I look at a Catholic website, I'm like, okay, well, that event happened 3 months ago. Here we are in August, and they had an event that happened in May. And I'm like, okay, well, if you can't keep the website updated, then what good is it? And I've even laughed a little with Genny because sometimes I'll bring a website in there and show her and say, see, they obviously don't care a lot about their website. Well, and even you say, well, Father, can't you get a volunteer to do that? Okay, well, you can. But then the information that goes on the website, where does that come from? Is that their own personal, what they want to put on the website? Probably is. So depending on what they think is important, but you're working on behalf of St. Lawrence Parish. So to have someone that has the vision of St. Lawrence Parish in mind as they're working on the website. So you can only imagine how much there is out there to do as it pertains to photographs of every event that we have going on in the parish here, which is no easy task. I know, sometimes if Genny can't be there at a particular event, she'll say, hey, would you mind taking a picture? And I'll say, yeah, I'll take one. And then because I'm doing this and doing that, it totally escapes me. It has to be your little baby in order to make sure that happens. So you can think of all these events. So the question that I'm really posing to our lay ministers this morning is, and I'm sure that this plays a part in your spiritual life, is how do you see God working through your camera, working through the website, working through social media? How do you see God actively involved in that here in your work?
Yeah, you would think that quite often it would get a little mundane because I do social media posts and the website and all these things that are just me and a computer. But the thing that really brings me the most gratification and fulfillment is capturing the parishioners. Sometimes I will say after I take someone's photo, that's beautiful. Because in a way, I really do see it that way. Like some people, we have such a hard time recognizing when someone says, you're beautiful. I say it because to me, my whole existence here is to exist for them and capture them and then share information with them. So it might sound like a really base, lame, just throw it out there compliment. But when I say beautiful, I really do have an experience when I get to capture people that I enjoy the interaction and I enjoy encountering them.
And I've learned a lot because having you on top of this before, it just kind of ended up before you, it just kind of ended up being, like if it gets done, it gets done. If it doesn't get done, it doesn't get done. And so it's inconsistent, and consistency is so important. But I've actually learned a lot from you. I can remember probably 7 or 8 years ago, maybe less or more, I don't know. But we had a reconciliation service, and I was like, it started at 7:00, and I'm like, we finished the 5:30 mass at 6:00. So I was like, why are we wasting an hour? Why don't we just, and that's the day before the event. So I go to Genny and I say, hey, can you just put on social media that the penance service at St. Lawrence is going to start an hour earlier? And I think you sent out an email. So you just did those two things. Now, this is less than 24 hours before the event was supposed to start, okay? So the only way you would show up at 6 is if you received that communication. And I remember counting 175 people. I'm like, wow. Okay, so they got the message. And I think that's really what it's all about, is do they get the message? Do we communicate with them? Well, it used to be the bulletin was enough. All you had to do was read the bulletin. Well, that's only from week to week, and you don't know. And plus, there isn't anything in the bulletin. If you notice your bulletin, there's never really anything with the bulletin of how successful this event was, or talking about the event. I know, Don Paul and I also do a faith series class. And I know last week we had, 100 or so people come to the faith series class. And of course, Genny is capturing all of the experience, and she'll post it, or she'll put it in the newsletter, or she'll do something with those photographs, which then encourage more people to do it. They're like, wow, we missed this. We need to put the next one in our calendar and make sure we show up at this one. So it really does encourage people. And if only 2 or 3 people showed up, that wouldn't necessarily be encouraging people. But when 100 people or more show up, then they're like, wow, what did I miss? So we see the newsletter. Also, you put posters, in the hallways, which I particularly like, because I'm still old fashioned. People walking down the hall to all of our events, they're looking, well, what's going on in the parish now? And they just see everything that's going on in the parish. Plus you get to pray for the Holy Father's intentions.
Which I really love, because there's one person that's a parishioner here, and if I'm a day late notifying, like the August prayer intention turns into September, and I'm a day behind because maybe it was on Sunday, he's so good. He lets me know that it's a day behind and it's September, and I'm like, oh.
And also, working for the church is one of those kind of things where you don't just have one particular job. You kind of have to multitask, and so you've certainly been very helpful working with our treasurers, which is our 50 plus parishioners in the parish. Very important part of our parish is helping a lot of these people. And for some of these people, this is their only social activity, is coming up to the parish and interacting with, the other parishioners. So they really do enjoy it. And you've certainly been very instrumental. We also take them on quite a few trips, which you help.
I was so happy to get involved with the Treasures Ministry, because I know you're big on formation. And I grew up down the street from my grandparents, and they were a huge part of my life, sometimes more formative than my own parents. And so when I started inheriting and taking on more treasures responsibilities, it's almost like my heart was made for it. And you always talk about formation. It's like, I think when I look at the treasures, even though sometimes it's tough work, I was made for this. Like, the Lord literally prepared my heart to have such care, because I love my grandparents so much.
And you know what, when we love treasures so much. And when we're talking with all these people, what do most of them talk about? Their grandchildren. They talk about their grandchildren. And these people had a huge influence on their grandchildren because they have such a good spiritual formation or whatever. So what have been some interesting things as it pertains to social media, or as it pertains to newsletter, or as it pertains to all of the advancement of communications? What have been some interesting things that you found over the last 10, 12 years?
One of the most frustrating things is not being able to control all the content. Like, we know a lot of people see mass times that aren't accurate because they're being like AI gathered, and Google was displaying them that it was a St. Lawrence in Tampa mass times for our parish, and I couldn't get rid of them. and it's just the first thing you see on Google. It's things like that that you can't always control because we try to be so intentional with our messaging, and then we have no control over getting something off the internet.
Of course, I'm the guilty party here. These people would show up for Mass at the wrong times, and I would say, no, show it to me. And they sure enough would pull it up, and then I would get a screenshot. I would literally take a picture of their phone and send it to you so that you can investigate. But at least we have someone that can investigate and someone that can try and make it more accurate. I know she just finished our pictorial directory, and the people absolutely have loved it. And we had a good number of parishioners that got their picture taken, and we give everyone that gets their picture taken a free directory so they can use it, and so they can cross-reference who's in our parish. I mean, a simple thing like a pictorial directory plays a part in their spiritual life, in trying to connect with other parishioners, and that's not so easy to do today, So again, your job that goes on, the endless number of tasks that you undertake is immense, and so certainly appreciate all that you do, and it certainly does help bring a lot of people closer to God, which is ultimately what we're all interested in doing. So thank you very much. So we're back here talking with lay ministers in the church and how important the role that they play in all of your parishes, and this particular gentleman, he has a long history of working in the church and wide variety of different ministries. So we can certainly talk a little bit about that. But right now, he's the head of maintenance for our parish. And you may say to yourself, and I'm sure all of y'all are saying, well, okay, we understand that what needs to happen in the church, but I think it's important for us to kind of understand it on a little bit deeper level here. Because can you imagine going to church and the air conditioner's not working, or going to church in the winter and there's no heat, or going to church and the microphone doesn't work?
You're making me anxious.
Can you imagine? Oh, no, I go on and on and on here, okay? Seriously, let's think about this, okay? You go to church one Sunday and the women's bathroom is out of order, okay? Think about it. I mean, how many times has that happened to us? Not happened in here because Todd's on call, which is awesome, and he can pretty much repair almost anything. And if he can't repair it, then he knows who can, and he can get in touch with them really quickly. I mean, I kind of laugh to myself a little bit just because I hear, others priests talking, you know what I mean? And it was a really cold, chilly Saturday morning one time. And so I get up in the morning and take a shower, and the hot water is no hot water. It's freezing cold. So, of course, it's Saturday morning, I text Todd. I mean, the new hot water heater was installed before lunch. I mean, I was like, wow, that's just incredible. It's just incredible. And very, very thankful, again, full time. And that's why he has to be on board. And most of the stuff that goes on around here as it pertains to maintenance is more about keeping it well running so that it doesn't break down. And that's what he goes around checking our well that provides the water so that our grass is watered, and the list goes on and on and on. So the question that I really want to pose to you is, how do you see God working through your ministry and working through all the maintenance projects that you undertake here?
I just think it's neat that you call it a ministry, because most people wouldn't associate that when you say lay minister staff. What I did before, a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, you in fact, in the title, youth minister.
We just had our youth minister, Stephan, on earlier, and he talked a lot about that too. So he's good. Yeah, he is good. But we move into this ministry, and that I like to think maybe behind the curtains, like no one really sees what you do unless something goes wrong.
Yeah, they'll notice if it's not there. The outside lights were not on.
That's right.
Because a light sensor was not working, and they would show up, and it became kind of scary and somewhat dangerous. They're parking in the dark.
Right. And so we put in a work order, and there you are this morning out changing the sensor. You know what I mean? And so if you're not, then you're getting someone that does know how to do that. I mean, I know you've had to repair some stucco, but you got someone who was a stucco person to repair. Someone hit a part of our church, But we really do have to understand, and I might even go a step further and say that that our parishioners, and you and I mean, we're men, and we don't necessarily see the beauty in all the things that a lot of our parishioners see the beauty in. But we just finished a landscaping project, which you're the one who makes sure that it all happens. Okay, you didn't have to physically do any of it, but you have to go out. And how many people have you had to talk to, like dozens of times, whether it's the city about the water, or whether it's the sprinkler man, or whether it's the, what kind of plants or bushes do we want to plant around this, or how, they had asked you 1,000 questions, but they finished it and it's really beautiful. And a lot of parishioners notice it. And so then you sit here and go, you sit here, from my perspective, you sit here and go, well, this is God's home. This is the church where we come and we meet Christ. So do we want to have a beautiful, do we really want to have a beautiful interior church, sacred? Yes. And so then the question is, within our means, now this is very important, within our means, can we have it landscaped where there's certain beauty, or do we just accept the grass and let the grass grow and don't worry about edging the grass and don't worry about, no, we want it in a sense for people to notice that there's a certain beauty as they're making their way into the church. And then when they get into the church, same thing. I mean, you've had to undertake several projects in our church, which all get approved from the archdiocese before we do any of these projects, but putting in a new floor, which was huge for our church, because before we had indoor-outdoor carpet in the church, which is all wrinkled and dirty. I mean, no matter how many times and tripping hazard, no matter how many times we tried to clean it, right? We tried to clean it a lot. You can only clean it so much. So we installed some beautiful stone, which you helped the people, facilitate getting all the pews out of the church and all that was a challenge. So you see the Lord's hand at work in many of these projects.
Absolutely, because I want to create an environment where people can focus where they need to focus. Because anything else would be a distraction. Every time we have a driving rain, we've got one issue with our roof that we just continually, every about 6 months, have to repair. But when the rain is coming down, you're only going to focus on that dripping down. Putting a bucket there, it's making noise in the middle of Mass. You're not going to focus on what's going on at the altar. You're certainly not going to listen to what you're saying at the ambo. It's just not going to be happening. So I want to create an environment. And it's not like I'm so concerned about everyone's comfort per se, but that's part of it. If the pew is rocking and it's not secured to the ground,
Or the kneeler is
yes, then you're not going to focus where you're supposed to focus, on the Holy Mass.
And that's what we really work on with our maintenance project. And I would say more you work on it, because you facilitate so many things, whether it's us installing a new organ. Well, you have to be there to make sure that all the wiring and all this is going in the right direction. Even if you have to call an electrician, you still have to coordinate all of that. Recently, our sacristan just asked you to kind of build a reliquary. We'll have a podcast on that one day. That'll be a fun one. It's beautiful, but it does, once again, it gives people an opportunity to pray before the relics of the saints, which again contributes to their well-being and their spiritual life in the church. And I've seen several people over there in front of that, saying a prayer to a particular saint, because we have relics of a wide variety of different saints in our reliquary. So those are the opportunities that we really give people by taking, I don't know, like being good stewards of what God has given us. So we make every effort to do good with what God has entrusted us. Now, this is important too for all of us to keep in mind, that it doesn't end there. As a matter of fact, it cannot end there. It cannot end. Mass means to be sent. It means to go out. So one of the things that I point out when sometimes people will make a comment like, well, it's nice that y'all have the ability to do all of this, to have a new floor and, put in new lights in our church and to do some new landscaping. We just had the whole parking lot repaved. I remind people, and this is very important for me, at least for me as a pastor, I remind people that more than $1 million that comes through our parish goes to Catholic Charities, goes to the Home Mission, goes to Peter's Pence, goes to St. Michael, goes to Christ the King. It doesn't stay here. More than $1 million, which is a significant part of our income. It doesn't stay here. It leaves. It goes out. We recently, over the summer, we had 2 different missionary groups come and give us a talk on missionary, and both of them took up a collection and did very well. So I believe we had very generous people, and they're not just generous with themselves, so they're not just buying a new car and buying new clothes for themselves. They really are giving a substantial portion of what they've been given, entrusted to help others. And I just sit here and go, that wouldn't happen at all if we wasn't here. You know what I mean? And so that's a good reminder to me, so we do care about the beauty. Again, we try and live within our means. So thank you for, for installing some new toilets for us around here. And thank you for installing a lot of ceiling tiles, and I see you changing light bulbs. What's some crazy things that you have to do as,
Well, you normally don't like the emergency stuff, when like you mentioned about the water heater. It's like, that's on a Saturday, but it's like, you're not going to be able to shower if you don't have hot water. So the emergency things, when Todd, there's a leak, or Todd, I smell smoke, you don't want those ones.
Fortunately, we've been blessed.
Yeah.
We've been very blessed.
But fun things like, hey, Todd, can you put the tape down for the lines for pickleball courts in the gym?
Yeah, right.
I'm like, yeah, we can do that. That's kind of fun.
So we have, they love to go. They love to play pickleball in there, don't they? And they wanted you had to install some blinds,
Right, to get the glare off of the floor. Okay.
probably the worst thing that I've seen us experience, more you experienced, and of course I'm just the one who's like, look at this happen, is obviously all of you probably know that every commercial building has to have a grease trap. Now, again, I'm a priest and I don't really understand. I can do the math in the name alone, but I was. So everything that goes through our kitchen has to go. The city requires you to have a grease trap so that it doesn't clog up all their sewers, and then you have to provide someone to come out and clean out your grease trap on a regular basis. Well, we don't have that much going on. I mean, we have, compared to, like, if you were a commercial restaurant, you would have stuff every day. Well, we don't have stuff every day, but I would say every week, maybe 2 or 3 times a month, and it filled up fast. And so obviously, it kind of got to the point where it was overflowing. It was pretty sad. And Todd had to call them and come out and clean it out. Those are the kind of things that no one would ever, there's no one that comes to we had our parish dinner last week, hundreds of people in the gym celebrating the Feast of St. Lawrence. None of them understand that, someone's going to have to go out there and clean out the grease trap, eventually. So there's a lot of things like that you do. And I just find them invaluable in our parish here. And so
It's one of the reasons why St. Joseph doesn't say anything in Scripture. He just gets the job done.
gets the job done. And if it means buying scaffolding, then he buys
Heck yeah. 3 levels, baby.
3 levels so we can repair things that are a little higher and need to be safe. Praise the Lord. We haven't had too many issues. We're trying to be very, very safe. You know what I mean? Yeah, we're good with that. So we appreciate all that you do. Thank you very much. And just know that you have people working in your parishes that are working very hard to make sure that all of the necessities are taken care of on a regular basis. So God bless you.